Welcome back to the Valley of the Suns podcast. I'm Kory Miller. Joining me on a special weeknight edition of the Valley of the Suns podcast is site expert Adam Maynes. Adam, thanks for coming on tonight.
Thank you as always, Kory, for having me.
Tonight we have an exciting topic to discuss. In the last 24 hours, the Suns have been involved in a blockbuster trade rumor with the Sacramento Kings, centering on their star big man, DeMarcus Cousins. Adam, for those of our listeners who maybe aren't completely up to date in the story or have been under a rock for the past 24 hours, how did these rumors come about and what exactly was reported yesterday?
So the rumor came about. John Gambadoro of Arizona Sports 98.7 tweeted about 10 minutes before his show started that, and by yesterday I mean January 31st, and said that he had been speaking with a particular contact working in Sacramento. I believe he said working for the Sacramento Bee, their local newspaper. So he had this contact, he and this contact with the Sacramento Bee had been speaking, and they came to the conclusion that the Phoenix Suns and Sacramento Kings had been discussing a potential trade centered around DeMarcus Cousins. This was something that supposedly for some time had kind of been percolating and at some point in recent history had kind of picked up a little bit of steam, apparently. He made it clear, and I think that all Suns fans should be well aware that this is strictly just rumor. This is strictly still in the discussion phase, that it is not particularly imminent. Now, today on that same show, it's the Burns and Gambo show on 98.7 FM in Arizona, he had on Suns general manager Ryan McDonough. Obviously, Ryan McDonough cannot talk about any particular players on another team. When they're under contract, when a player's under contract with another team, they're the other team's property. So McDonough can get in a lot of trouble and get fined. But they were asking, Burns and Gambo were asking a lot of questions around players of DeMarcus Cousins' ilk, if that's the right word. Talked about age, talked about prime years, talked about contract, talked about statistics, and then most importantly, talked about personality. Would a personality such as DeMarcus Cousins' work in the Phoenix Suns' locker room, work in the organization? And I think that is the $64 million question, or in Cousins' case, $207 potentially $1 million question, is would he work for the Phoenix Suns? And that is basically where we're at right now. It is in discussion. It is still possible. It is still something that could happen. But Suns fans should also be aware it is something that might not happen. It could just be what it is right now, just a hopeful, fun rumor that come trade deadline on February 22nd just didn't come to fruition. So that's where we're at right now. So now the question is, as Suns fans, is that what we want? Do we want to trade what supposedly is being offered to the Sacramento Kings? Now, what is being offered? Potentially Alex Len, center, TJ Warren, small forward, the Phoenix Suns first-round pick this year, which could very possibly be number one. Certainly top 3 is a probability. Top 5 is a almost certainty at this point. Additional pieces might still be involved. Everybody's like, get rid of Brandon Knight. Something tells me Brandon Knight would have to be part of that package. But moreover is one of, if not both of the Miami Heat draft picks, which right now are very coveted. Suns already traded away the Los Angeles Lakers pick 2 years ago to get Brandon Knight, which potentially this season could be a top 5 pick again, and certainly top 10. Do the Suns really want to risk trading away next season's Miami Heat pick? They're going to be terrible, most likely. So that very well could be a lottery pick. Do we want to package 3, 4, or even 5 of those pieces together?
I do.
6 to bring in DeMarcus Cousins.
I do. I mean, I can't help it. If you have the ability to go out and get a player like DeMarcus Cousins, who's entering the prime of his career, he's having a great season. His scoring average, I believe, has gone up every season since 2011, 2012. He's shooting the best three-point percentage of his career. When you have the ability to get a top 10, a top 15 player in the league like that, and you don't have to give up any of your stars, I think you have to do it. Now, we may have to give up one of the Miami picks. I'm actually okay giving up next year's Miami pick because I believe it's top 7 protected. So it's not going to be a top 3 or top 5 pick. In my mind, because of how bad Miami is and because they don't have a very bright outlook for the next 3 to 5 years, the 2020 unprotected pick, I think, is a much higher commodity that I'm hoping the Suns hold on to. If I can get Cousins for Len, Warren, and 2 first-round picks, if Cousins is going to re-sign, and I think that's the big if, You have to pull the trigger. You can't pass up opportunities like this. And I think, like I said, the big if is if he's going to resign. He's signed through next season for $18 million. Then he's eligible for, if he got the extension from the Kings, he would get $207 million. The Suns won't be able to give him quite that much, and I don't know how a sign and trade would work. I believe under the new CBA, the Kings would not be eligible to sign and then trade him. So the Suns would be getting him only under contract through next season. You need some kind of indication from Cousins and the Kings that he was interested in staying here long term. But the Suns have a bit of an edge in that department, I think, because of all the players they have from Kentucky. The Suns have a well-established relationship with John Calipari, who's still incredibly close with DeMarcus Cousins. Cousins played with Bledsoe, Kentucky. The Suns have two other Kentucky guards in Booker and Ulis. If there's a place where Cousins would re-sign that's not a huge market, like in LA or Chicago or New York, Phoenix is a good place for that. Now, Adam, you mentioned this a little bit. There are other considerations when talking about DeMarcus Cousins. He's been thought of to have a poor attitude at times, and his locker room fit could be a question mark, especially coming so closely to what Phoenix and the Suns had to deal with Markieff Morris. What kind of a sense do you have on how that would work here in Phoenix if a trade like this were to go through?
Well, I believe that the Suns as an organization and fans in general would have to bank on head coach Earl Watson being able to kind of work his psychological magic in keeping DeMarcus Cousins grounded emotionally, mentally. I hear from radio shows that, well, he's kind of nutty. Well, he does this. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the kid. What is he? He's 26 years old. He's probably egotistical. Big freaking deal, in my opinion.
To be a star in the NBA, you have to be to some extent. If we're all being completely honest with ourselves, you can't be a star in the NBA and not be egotistical.
I'll bring that a little bit farther. I think if you want to be successful in life on any level, if you want to run a good podcast, you got to be cocky, right? I mean, you got to know that I'm running a damn good podcast that people are going to tune in to listen every week. So, I mean, and that's the thing. Sure, he's being paid millions and millions of dollars. He's got all these life perks that the rest of us can only dream of.
Yep.
But does that really make him a bad guy? Charles Barkley is obviously the singular best comparison that the Suns can have in terms of bringing in somebody from the outside, bringing in somebody with an attitude, somebody with a personality that's very brash. Barkley and Cousins are not the same, and Barkley is an entertainer, I think, more than he is kind of crazy. And I hate to even use that word, and I use that with the lowercase c very loosely because I just don't know really what the big deal is with DeMarcus Cousins. But regardless, it worked. It worked for 4 years, and if you look back in history, I think he probably could have retired here if the Suns hadn't dismantled his teams the way they did. But that's neither here nor there.
You know what?
My point though is I don't know why Cousins wouldn't work here. I don't know why a change of scenery wouldn't work. I don't know why winning wouldn't change some things. I don't know why playing with his best friend wouldn't change things. And then you've got what some other radio show guys call is the Jedi Master in Earl Watson. He's just kind of this his out of the box kind of leadership that he brings to the Suns. I'm personally not the biggest fan right now, but DeMarcus Cousins could be the big kind of, all right, Earl, this is how you want to be. Make this work. And if it works, then hell, I mean, we're going to win games. There's no doubt about that. You throw him in there with Booker and Bledsoe for the next 5 years, and then, whatever, rest of the core, obviously you've got Bender and Chris and whoever. You're going to win games. And winning cures all ills, doesn't it, in sports?
Well, and to go a step back on maybe Cousins' maturity, because I think that's the right word for what we're discussing, because he's not a bad guy. He hasn't done anything bad. He's had some maturity issues in Sacramento, but I mean, who wouldn't? The Kings are a laughingstock. That's a dysfunctional franchise. I mean, he ran George Karl out of town. George Karl imploded almost every team he's ever coached. If you look back at Seattle, Milwaukee, Denver, a Karl coached team has almost never ended well. So,
which is why I think it's unfair to say, and I don't think you intended it the way you did. I think it was always unfair to say that DeMarcus Cousins ran Karl out of town. Karl is one of the most disliked head coaches in NBA history.
Oh, right, yeah. I don't mean that he necessarily ran him out of town. But the two of them did not see eye to eye. And I think Cousins kind of got a bad rap for that. But if you look at Karl's history, he hasn't seen eye to eye with a lot of stars in almost every place he's been. And like I said, Cousins actually hasn't done anything bad. He's had some maturity issues, but he's a young star in the NBA, and he's not the only one who's had a question mark like that. And again, kind of going off of what you mentioned, what a great opportunity for a mentor like Tyson Chandler.
Oh,
Who else would be perfect to mentor a young star big man? And then I've got to mention it again. He and Eric Bledsoe are close. They've played at Kentucky. We have other Kentucky guards here. The Suns have a well-established relationship with John Calipari. That's big for Cousins. Cousins and Calipari are still very close.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a reach to say that Cousins could come here and never have any maturity issues whatsoever and be a huge success. Now, the question is, do the Suns really have a chance of getting him for a package that light? Because if we're being honest with ourselves, it would sting to give up Warren, because I do think he's a good player that still has a lot of promise, but you have to give up something. I don't think giving up Len is a big deal.
That's a shot to my heart. I'm president of the Alex Len fan club.
Losing the first-round pick this year obviously is that. I mean, that's the centerpiece of what the Suns would be giving the Kings. But I mean, even a top 2 or 3 pick, that's a 50-50 shot at best. And Cousins is an established star.
He's a sure thing.
And especially in this day and age in the league, especially for big men, you can't find star big men anymore like you can with Cousins. I mean, there's maybe 2 or 3 other centers in the entire league you would put in the conversation with him. And I'm thinking Anthony Davis, Marc Gasol, Karl Anthony Towns. Maybe I'm missing 1 or 2, but he's right there in that conversation. Those guys may never leave their teams. Star big men are so hard to find nowadays that can play in today's NBA that if you have a chance to get one, you have to go roll the dice. You have to go take advantage of it. And I think if you can do that without giving up Bledsoe or Booker, and you don't even have to give up Bender or Chris, I think that's a slam dunk. You have to go for it.
Well, okay, so I've got kind of 2 sides to this next point. The first thing is I do want to say a couple of positives about DeMarcus Cousins coming to the Suns, and then I do have some reservations, and I don't believe that my reservations come all that unwarranted. First thing, he's currently averaging 28.2 points. If he were to bring that to the Suns, he would be the highest scoring player in franchise history for any single season. Second highest was Tom Chambers, and I should have this number in front of me. I don't, but I believe it was 27 point something. So he's about a point higher than even Tom Chambers is the Suns' highest scorer ever. He is also averaging 10.5 rebounds. That Amari Stoudemire never even reached that point. Very few players in Suns history have. Obviously, right now, Tyson Chandler has got a little over 12, or right about 12, so I mean, that's a little bit higher. But that's also close to some of the franchise leaders in Suns history. He is also averaging, as a center, 4.4 assists. I don't know if any Suns center has ever averaged 4.4 assists. And even if somebody has to bring in 28 points and 4.4 assists, it just blows my mind.
I mean, definitely.
He's also averaging 1.4 steals.
Yeah.
You know who else is averaging 1.4 steals? Eric Bledsoe. He leads the team with 1.4 steals.
I think if you looked back to the 70s, I think Alvin Adams might have averaged that many assists, but definitely Adams never averaged 28 points a game, I'll tell you that.
Led teams in assists too.
I think there's no question that if the Suns got Cousins, giving up Len, Warren, and let's say 2 picks this year and maybe the Miami pick next year, there's no question that makes the Suns a playoff team next year. It makes them viable, it makes them relevant. But all we know is that the discussions have happened. That's all that we know. Now, Gambadoro has reported things before, and he's normally spot on, so I trust what he says. I know there have been some reports out of Sacramento that these discussions happened a long time ago and that the Suns are trying to inflate Len and Warren's value. I don't know if I buy into that because I trust what Gambo says. He's broken stories about the Suns before. He's done this for a long time. He has a lot of sources in the business. So I trust what he says. So I believe that these conversations have happened recently. With that being said, if you're the Suns and you pull off this deal and you get Cousins, the minute he's introduced in a Suns jersey, you have a countdown clock for getting him re-signed, and there's going to be a hailstorm of drama surrounding that until he signs an extension on the dotted line. Suns fans will not stick around if you go trade for DeMarcus Cousins and he's here for a year and then he pulls a Dwight Howard and he leaves because you weren't able to get him to sign. And so that is my biggest concern. And unfortunately, I don't know how much of a guarantee you can get from Cousins or from Sacramento that he'd be interested in signing here before you pull the deal. If you're the Suns, how much are you willing to give up for him?
Well, again, as much as I love Len, and I do love Warren too, I think he's underutilized in this offense at the moment. And I do think that if Tyson Chandler is either traded or his contract runs out and Len is still a part of this team, I think Len is the center of the future. I think he's the heir apparent. Statistically, he's right on the verge of being a double-double guy, 10-10 guy already. And, just give him time, and I think he'll be fine. And I said it as a starter. Obviously, his numbers are a little bit less because he comes off the bench most of the time. But that package alone, okay, totally fine. My biggest reservation is not even the Miami pick, because I can kind of look at that Miami pick as, well, it's not ours anyway, so if we can get something else for it, whatever. Mm-hmm. I have been a lifelong Suns fan, as you have, as probably everybody listening here have. The Suns have had a top 3 pick twice in franchise history.
First
time was
Neil Walk, and let me see if I can guess.
Gilliam. Back in 89? No.
That was a bust.
Fudge. I just had it. 87, excuse me. Back in 87. Armin Gilliam lasted 2.5 years with the Suns. Neil Walk was he was a great Sun,
but when you look at who was taken first ahead of him, when it was Lou Alcindor, or better known as Kareem, I mean, it's hard to live up to that. But he was a great Sun. Worked with the organization for many years too.
He was a family friend of mine. I knew him personally. I'm a jazz drummer. He was a great jazz fan. I truly do miss him. He's a very nice man. Yeah, his peak year, though, was 72, 73. Averaged 20 points, 20.2 points, and 12.4 rebounds. I mean, the guy was an above average center, at least for that year, and he was a decent center overall. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you can't live up to Lou Center. But regardless, I was kind of going back to the Armin Gilliam aspect. The Suns have only had the number 2 pick, or at least the top 3 pick, twice in franchise history. Mm-hmm. It is something that, as a Suns fan, that when we lose, I look for. I think we all do. We just pray to the basketball gods that those ping pong balls bounce in the Suns' favor and we get a first, preferably, or a second pick. My biggest reservation, and this is going to sound silly when we're talking about potentially bringing in a top 10 player in the league right now for a decent package regardless. My biggest reservation is that pick is going to be the number 1 pick, and the Sacramento Kings are going to get somebody who is a franchise player. Now, granted, we will have traded for a 26-year-old superstar, mm-hmm. but it's one of those things that it's when you talk about the spoils of victory. The number 1 pick is the spoils of losing. You went through all this heartache and something went your way. And people might be laughing at me right now going, well, you're getting DeMarcus Cousins. You're not going to draft DeMarcus Cousins this year. Sure. But think about getting the number 1 pick. That's got to be a great feeling. And it's a feeling that no Phoenix Suns fan has ever felt, is getting the number 1 pick. And I just have this funny feeling that we're going to trade that pick, and it's going to go number 1, and we're going to look at it and go, that could have finally been us. Hopefully, if this trade does go down, DeMarcus Cousins is a better player than Fulton, I think, is the projected number 1 pick. Hopefully, historically, is better. Yep. What if he's not? What if he is a bust? Somehow DeMarcus is a bust at the Suns. What if he does leave in a year and a half? What if he does cause this franchise to crumble, and we're now waiting another 5 years? Now we're looking at 2025 before we can finally get back on our feet. And the entire time we're looking back, watching Fulton score 25 and dishing out 10 assists or whatever with Sacramento. We're going, he could have been ours. That, to me, is the biggest reservation. And while I trade the known commodities of Len and Warren, yes. While I trade the unknown commodity of the Miami pick more easily than the Suns pick, yes, absolutely. Because, again, like I said, it's not ours. It's kind of like playing with house money. But, boy, does that Suns pick, the potential of having the number 1 pick, just really entice the hell out of me. Make me go, and trade just something else.
I think, again, it comes back to there are numerous risks in taking this deal. And you have the maturity risk, and is it going to be a good fit? And I think that's one you absolutely have to roll the dice on, because I think, again, if he's not able to be successful in Phoenix, I think there's going to be very few places in the league he'll be able to be successful, just because of kind of the the Kentucky support system, I'll say, that the Suns have. The biggest risk to me, again, it's the contract. You don't want him here for 1 year and then something happens and he leaves. If this deal happens, the discussions have happened, it's a long ways away. For anyone that was hoping they were going to wake up tomorrow and see that Cousins was a Phoenix Sun, the Suns actually play the Kings on Friday, and so I guarantee you, even if they are in advanced discussions about this, nothing's happening before Friday because there's no way the Kings trade Cousins only to have him come play them in a couple days.
Well, and if I could interject real quick, this is not coming from some inside source. This is just coming from my kind of looking at the calendar. If the Suns are trading that pick, the Kings do not want that pick until after that final game has been played. I want to say it's February 19th, the final game before the trade deadline, before the All-Star weekend. They want the Suns to lose as many games as possible to help bolster their chances at getting, rolling that number 1 overall pick come lottery time. Because I know that bringing DeMarcus Cousins to the Suns, while they might only win 10 of their final 25 games, that is probably 5-7 games more than they would have won, which does hurt those odds. So I would bet dollars to donuts. I'd bet my mortgage that this deal does not occur, absolutely does not occur until after that final game has been played. So that way Sacramento can get as many ping pong balls as possible.
Oh, absolutely.
If that is the pick that is being moved.
And I think what's probably likely to happen is that the Suns are going to settle into that 2 or 3 spot in the draft. I think in terms of if the ping pong balls go the way that they should, I think Brooklyn, technically Boston, will end up with probably the first pick overall. And then you're looking at, right now, Phoenix is 2, and I'm guessing they're going to be in that 2 or 3 spot. To give you my final thoughts before we close this episode, I think you have to go for it. And I'm scared, and I'm nervous, and I know that this could set the rebuilding project back 2 or 3 years. But if it works out, these are the type of risks that get teams to the finals. This is the type of risk that could, not next year and probably not even the year after that, but 2 or 3 years from now, you could have Devin Booker entering his prime, DeMarcus Cousins in the middle of his prime, Bledsoe in the middle of his prime, Bender and Chris, you have time to see what they develop into. That's a good team. That's a playoff team, and depending on how Bender and Chris and Booker all develop with Cousins and Bledsoe, that could be a finals contender. And by the time we're reaping the benefits of this potential deal 2 or 3 years from now, that's about 2020. You're looking, that's a full decade since the Suns have really been relevant.
Oh boy.
And
way to make me feel old.
And for me, it's worth the risk because we haven't been relevant for so long that when you have opportunity to acquire talent like this, I think you have to go for it. And my biggest hesitation will be the contract. And I think if you get an idea that he's going to re-sign and he seems like he's really happy, I think you have to go for it. And I'm really nervous in saying that, but my final vote would be a yay. What about you?
Oh boy. Well, I'll tell you, you're saying that your biggest hesitation is the contract. I got to say, I feel a little bit more confident about the contract than you possibly do. And simply because I just don't see him. Again, I mean, going back to what I was saying earlier, I don't really know about his maturity level. I don't really know what's, kind of been going on in Sacramento. I don't see him as the kind of guy that's going to say, screw you to one of his best friends in Eric Bledsoe. You have to know that the moment these discussions were leaked and the moment the players found out, oh, I'm tied to this, oh, he's tied to us, Eric Bledsoe has been texting, calling, Skyping, Snapchatting. They've been talking, he and Cousins.
Oh, I bet it's been longer than that.
I feel like if he's coming to the Suns, Bledsoe is going to Ryan McDonough and saying, yo, I spoke to him. He's in. He wants to stay here. He'll sign the extension. I really can't imagine that the Suns would make that deal unless Bledsoe specifically spoke with him, with Cousins, that is, and got Cousins's, yes, I'm in. I'm here for long run. I've been wanting to play with you. Hell, let's go get freaking John Wall. Let's make this our super team. To which I say, let's do that too. But
that's a lot of guards.
Yeah, I know. So that is not quite as that isn't quite the biggest hesitation in my mind. the biggest hesitation, truthfully, is that draft pick, and maybe it's just a nostalgic thing. I hate losing. I hate losing. You play me at checkers and you beat me, I throw the board on the floor. So I'm so sick and tired of watching the Suns lose. And if Cousins comes to the Suns, I will be psyched. And I know that that's going to immediately make this playoff contender, or probably, sixth immediately, sixth place in the Western Conference immediately,
I think
especially
so.
with how far the bottom half of the West has kind of fallen.
Yep.
We float. So I mean, I'm very happy with it right there. I'm not going to lie to you. Maybe it is just me. If Sacramento gets that number 1 overall pick, and that number 1 overall pick could have been ours, and we went through all this losing for the last 6 years, 7 seasons now following this one, to then not actually get to reap the direct rewards of that losing with the number 1 pick, I will be bummed, and I will be watching that guy for the rest of his career, wondering if he, what he would have looked like in the purple and orange, and wondering, especially if somehow Cousins is a flop, what it would have been like with him. All that being said, pull the trigger.
Yep.
Let's bring DeMarcus Cousins in. Let's win. I'm so sick and tired of losing. I'm so tired of it. Oh my goodness, I want to win so bad, and I do want to kind of pimp up one of my stories I posted just today, and by today I mean February 1st. What would the Phoenix Suns look like with DeMarcus Cousins on the roster? I not only go over what they would look like for the final 25 games, what the roster would look like, how they might play, what I predict they would win. I then go over this summer and those transactions to help build a winning team. And then I go over 3 full seasons. And I go over 3 full seasons specifically because Eric Bledsoe and Devin Booker, their contracts are up in off the top of my head, I want to say it's the 2018-2019 season, prior to the 2018-2019 season.
Booker is under 18.
That's when we start to really look at what that core will be long term, and how the Suns will be able to work out having a winner with 3 superstars, 3 stars at least with big contracts. So I do want to say, check that story out. I think you'd find very interesting. Yeah,
Bledsoe is signed 2 years, 2 full seasons after this season. Booker will be on a 2-year team option, but then he'd be a restricted free agent after that.
Yes. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that final season, that's the first that I discussed. That's the first season where they're all under contract under the new CBA.
Yep. If it so happens that the Suns trade this pick and they get Cousins and the pick ends up being first overall, I can understand being bummed a little bit, but I'm still sitting on the couch watching the TV knowing I have DeMarcus Cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And that would help me feel a lot better. Again, to wrap up, we know that the discussions have taken place. It's very likely that even if something were to happen, it's not happening anytime soon. You probably wouldn't see it until much closer to the deadline, which is about 2.5 weeks away. But stay tuned to valleyofthesuns.com for all 3 of those weeks. So we'll be covering not only this story, but all of the other storylines for the team regarding the trade deadline. And keep listening to this podcast, and we'll keep you up to date on any rumors involving the Suns and DeMarcus Cousins. Adam, thanks for coming on, and thanks for discussing this. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully next time we're talking, we have a new center in Phoenix.
Yes, sir. Real quick, I would just like everybody to know, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Phoenix Suns blog. Follow us on Twitter at Valley of the Suns. That is at Valley of the Suns. VOTSuns@gmail.com. Go ahead and send us any of your questions, and we'll be happy to answer those either on air or we'll email you back, or whatever you need. And we'd love to talk to you guys and hear your opinions. And of course, always please comment on all of our posts. We love to have those discussions. And even if we don't join in, trust us, we read them because we love seeing those conversations. Because hey, you guys sometimes, maybe even unknowingly, send us ideas for either a story or for a podcast. So your discussions are always very welcome and encouraged.
Yep. Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.